All right, Alexander, let's talk about the first round of the French parliamentary elections. And the latest polling shows that the latest returns are showing that Macron's ensemble, an alliance, a coalition group, is did come out ahead, but not by much, not as much as people expected. And we still don't quite know if he's going to have a majority. It doesn't look like that, but we still don't know for sure. Melanchon was pretty close. His coalition and alliance, I believe it's called the NUP, the NUPES. One's the Ensemble and one's the NUPES, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, and then you have Le Pen's group as well. They did, I think they were like at 16%. I mean, they did okay, I guess. But it looks like as we go to round two of the elections, that Macron may not have a majority, and that would make it very, very difficult for him to follow through on his agenda. That's how it looks. But we're going to find out on the what is it going to be on the 16th? On
I,
the 16th, I believe, is the second
yeah,
round. I'm not quite sure.
absolutely. I think that's right. Yes,
Or on the
it's quite
19th.
long.
Yeah,
19th, yeah, whatever. But anyway, it's a
I think
while
on the
off.
19th. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, it's a while off.
yeah. Okay.
I'm going to say straight away, the media, the international media, is not covering this story, and they should do because this is a big earthquake, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to here first of all declare an interest. I don't like Mélenchon at all. I find him somebody an opportunistic and vain politician. He's certainly not somebody that I think is the right person to lead France. That's my own personal opinion about him. But I mean, I do want to declare that bias in advance. But the fact is, he's come out and his group has done almost as well as Macron's party did. Now, bear in mind that I was seeing polls just a few days ago, which was saying that 44% of French people expected Macron's group to win a majority. Not quite the same as that they would vote for this group, but the high expectation was that they would win a majority, and only around much less, fewer than, certainly less than 25% were expecting Mélenchon's group to do as well, to do particularly well. So instead, we've got these two groups, Mélenchon's group, Macron's almost level. Macron's slightly ahead. Then we got Le Pen's group, which actually did, in my opinion, quite well in an election where you might have expected her to be squeezed, her group to be squeezed, given that there's this fight going on between Macron's and Mélenchon's, given that there's a lot of overlap between the policy positions of Le Pen's grouping and Mélenchon's grouping. I have to say, at the moment, unless I'm missing something, it's looking increasingly unlikely that Macron will have a majority in the French National Assembly. Now, if that is the case, then he has to find a prime minister who's acceptable to Mélenchon. Mélenchon becomes the kingmaker, in effect, because without him, Macron can't govern. And Mélenchon has made it pretty clear that he wants to be that prime minister. That might be more than Macron can accept. But whoever is the new prime minister, it means that Macron will have lost control of the French government. He won't be the undisputed president of France that he has been up to this time. Now, that creates all kinds of complications because, of course, Mélenchon is a leftist and has campaigned as an ultra-leftist. His grouping includes groups like the French Communist Party, for example, and Greens and all sorts of people. It's pretty vociferous, but it's a left-wing grouping. He wants a radically different economic policy from the one that Macron has advocated. And of course, he is strongly opposed to the policy of supporting Ukraine in this war that is going on in the East. So a government that tries to bring together both Macron's and Melanchon's ideas is going to be incredibly unstable. And I have to say that it looks to me increasingly as if France is heading towards even deeper instability. And that if you're looking for a neoliberal Atlanticist policy to be followed by the French government, by the French presidency, then that's no longer, always assuming, as I said, that there is a hung parliament, that Macron loses these majorities as expected. But it's beginning to look as if you can't count on France being this solid Europeanist, Atlanticist, globalist force that it has been under Macron for so long. So, this could mark a sea change, and it could pave the way for a further breakthrough in 5 years' time when the next French presidential election comes round. So it's a fascinating result. It shows Macron. It confirms our analysis of the presidential elections, that Macron won despite being deeply unpopular because of the ideological divisions within French society. But it shows that the policy that Macron embodies is unpopular with the French people, to the point where they're now, it seems, manoeuvring to deliver a parliament that is almost guaranteed to try to block him.
Yeah, the second round is going to take place on the 19th. So that's going to be the second round of the votes. And actually, this first round had a record low turnout. Fewer than half of the registered voters casted a ballot in this first round. And finally, I think that, the fact that Macron won't be able to, if things go as you say, and as we're looking at the trend, and he doesn't have a majority, the fact that Macron won't be able to pursue his globalist, Atlanticist policies, I think that's going to really, really get to him, because the messaging is that Macron won't be able to pursue his domestic policies, pensions, and getting the books in order and the economy in order. But Macron was never interested in that. That doesn't really interest Macron. What's going on inside of France to Macron is it seems like it's boring for him. What he really likes, what he really strives for, is to be the Napoleon of Europe, to be the king of Europe, and to pursue his globalist, Atlanticist objectives and dreams. If he can't do that, it's going to irk him a lot. I mean, it's going to really, really get to him in a big, big way.
Absolutely. Now, can I just say, in theory, the French constitutional system says that the president, even in the situation where the parliament is opposed to the president still controls foreign and defense policy. But of course, the reality is that everything is connected. You have to get the budget passed through the parliament, which includes budget for the defense ministry, for example, and your ability, if you're Macron, to pursue integrationist policies in Europe or aggressive policies with respect to, say, Russia in Ukraine, when you have a parliament that is opposed to you, his room for maneuver, will just disappear. That is the political reality, whatever the constitution may say. So it's showing how deeply disaffected French society has become. And the fact that there was a disastrously low turnout, a very low turnout, to my mind is completely unsurprising, because it's perfectly clear what the French want. They want an end to globalism, an end to everything that Macron represents. They weren't able to vote for Le Pen because they're still stuck on their ideological, tribal affinities left over from the French Revolution and all that. So they still got Macron, but they don't like him. They don't particularly like Melanchon either. That's my own personal view. He has his supporters, especially amongst young people, but I don't think he's somebody who has convinced the French nation at all. And of course, Le Pen just doesn't have the force of personality and the charisma and the ability to overcome the various great ideological and structural obstacles that have prevented her up to now from breaking through. So the result is a low turnout because nobody is particularly liked. But the sentiment of the French people, I think, is becoming increasingly obvious. Consider 25% of the French voted for Macron's bloc on a low turnout. That shows that only around 10% of French people feel the great enthusiasm to come out and vote for a political movement that believes in European integration, globalization, neoliberalism, and all those things. That's how weak support for it is in France.
So what do you think they're saying now in Brussels after looking at the first round? So again, we still don't have the second round of voting. So after the first round, what do you think the EU globalists are thinking? They've seen the coalition in Estonia collapse, even though that coalition says it was more to do with domestic stuff than actual Russia-Ukraine policy. We're seeing a political crisis in Bulgaria start to form as well. They're also kind of saying the same thing. This has to do more with North Macedonia and the problems with our economy than Ukraine, but still. And now they're seeing these, they saw the UK and they saw what happened with Boris Johnson, even though it's not Europe, but not the EU anymore. But still, they're looking at this. What do you think they're saying now after they've seen this first round of results with Macron?
Well, they're going to be very concerned and they're going to be phoning up Paris. There's going to be all kinds of people phoning up Paris and they'll be talking to Macron's people. They'll be saying, do you have the situation under control? And they'll be phoning back and saying, yes, we do. Don't worry. We'll pull it together. We'll find some way that, it all comes right when the second round comes round. And they'll be going away in Brussels and they'll be, hoping and praying that, when Macron says that he's going to sort it out, he does actually sort it out. Because if he doesn't, then they're in a very difficult position. And they know it. The one thing these people do understand is how politics works. And of course, there's a strong French presence within the Commission. And those people certainly know how French politics works. So they're going to be worried and they're going to be stressed. Now, it's very interesting that, in France, in Bulgaria, in Estonia, in Britain, we don't mention the war. We don't talk about the war as being the factor that is behind all of these crises. Of course it is, because a war is creating this global inflation crisis. Now, I've had some pushback from some people about this. They say it's the money printing, it's the overspending by the Biden administration, which we covered fully on the Duran last year when it first began. And of course, that gave a huge boost to inflation last year. But then along comes the EU, along comes the Biden administration, along comes the British government, and they impose all these sanctions on Russia. And their latest one, obviously, was on the oil supply. And that is creating supply problems that are affecting the entire global supply chain in energy, in food, in every type of raw materials that you can think of, in metals, in neon gas, in whatever. And that is causing inflation. It's causing inflation to zoom up in every country. And it's creating a cost of living crisis, as we call it in Britain, and nobody should be fooled about this. That is why Boris Johnson is in political trouble in Britain. That's why the Conservatives are in political trouble in Britain. That's why we have a political crisis in Britain. It's creating problems in France, which is why this election is not gone as well for Macron as many people expected that it would. It's undoubtedly a major factor behind the political crisis in Estonia. In Estonia, inflation is running at 22%. If you tell me that that has no bearing on the fact that the government there has collapsed, then I simply say to you that you just do not understand the way politics works in any country. 22% inflation is bound to have a serious political effect. And is, of course, having a political effect in Bulgaria, where many people weren't happy about the war in the first place, because Bulgaria is a Slav Orthodox country. It's had long, deep historic connections with Russia. Bulgarians and Russians can understand each other's languages reasonably well, not entirely well, but they can understand each other. And the Bulgarians feel this historic debt to the Russians who liberated them from the Ottomans. So you've got all of these factors running into play, but the thread that brings them all together, which explains why we have this election in France, this election result in France, this governmental crisis in Britain, this collapse of a government in Estonia, and this brewing crisis in Bulgaria, what is bringing them all together is the war and the inflation that it's caused. And we're going to see more of it over the next few months. There's tensions, I understand, in Italy. The coalition there is starting to fracture. And with Salvini even thinking of going to Moscow, he was going to speak to, but there was a lot of criticism about this. And of course, in Germany as well, I strongly suspect that at some point in the autumn, the government there will start to unravel, especially when the Germans discover that Robert Habeck, their economics minister, hasn't been telling them the truth about the situation in terms of energy security for the German people and for the German economy. That Germany isn't full of gas and full of oil and can just go ahead and cut itself off from Russian oil and gas in the way that he pretends. So I think, we're going to see more and more of these crises happening all across Europe in the next couple of weeks and months. And what we're seeing is the overture to the main drama, which is still to come.
Shock and awe sanctions. The only question is who exactly was the shock and awe meant for? Was it meant for Russia or was it meant for Europe?
Where historians will go away and they will write about this and they will say it was the worst thought out decision that has ever been made. There was a fascinating article. I discussed it in a video that I did for my own channel by a man called Wolfgang Münchau, who is somebody I'm sure most people on our programs haven't heard of him. But if you follow economic commentary in Britain and Germany, he's a very, very important figure. And he used to have until recently a very widely read column in the Financial Times, for example. And he actually came out and said, we didn't think this through. We didn't think through what the implications of the sanctions would be. And in fact, the sanctions are backfiring on us, and we have to do a deal fast. Well, all I can say about that is that Wolfgang Münchau might have a great reputation, but here on the Duran, we were months ahead of him. That's all I will say about that.
Just to end the video, just listening to what you said, it's incredible when you sit back and think, these are our leaders that are running countries, that are running the European Union or running the United States. And these are our leaders and they don't think through sanctions that they're about to place on another country. I mean, when you just sit back and reflect on it, it's quite incredible that that's what's happening. We just don't think through. We just do. We don't think it through.
We don't think it through.
I mean, does anyone live their life like this? I'm not going to look both ways before crossing the street. I'm just going to go for it.
But the words, we didn't think this through are in Wolfgang Münchau's article. He actually uses those words. I mean, it really is. I mean, it is quite astonishing. And you actually go on to read the article. I mean, there are still lots and lots of things that he gets wrong because, of course, he accepts in the article that he was working on all kinds of assumptions about, the strength of the West and the weakness of Russia, which turned out to be wrong. And though he accepts that he hasn't thought it through, they didn't think it through properly, he still thinks lots of things about the strength of the West and the weakness of Russia, which if he sat down and studied things properly and asked the right questions and spoke to the right people and listened to the experts and took an interest in these places, he would, in other words, if he actually thought it through, he would realise are still wrong. So there we go. They don't think it through. They don't do their homework.
Yeah, they don't do their homework. Yeah. All right. Well, it's incredible. It really is. That these are the people that are lecturing us.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, we'll leave it there. The Duran.locals.com, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off all merchandise when you use the code Good Day. Take care.